The biggest thing is that I guess you had to be the grown-up. Sometimes people can infantilize people who are CTAs because the CTM is your boss, or anyone is your boss apart from your own boss. But as you say, it's a role that's really undervalued, and people sometimes don't treat you very well, and then that can actually give you low self-esteem. So going from CTA to an eTMF manager, where you actually decide things, you write the processes, and people have to follow those processes.
TMF Daily enthusiasts, today we're talking about career progression in the TMF. Perhaps you've been a clinical trial assistant for 5 years and you're ready to show progression on your resume, and you're ready to learn some new skills. Well, the guest I have today is going to give us great insight on 3 different roles that involve the TMF. Karla Navera Anderson is a clinical trial manager and has extensive experience in the trial master file. She is one of the top sought-out TMF speakers in the world and a TMF ambassador. In today's episode, we'll be examining the clinical trial assistant role, and we'll explore the range of tasks that you might take on. We'll also clarify that eTMF manager role doesn't always involve managing a team, and we'll discuss how the CTM role could focus solely on TMF responsibilities without the usual other CTM duties. Karla, welcome to the TMF Daily Podcast.
Thank you, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I'm super pumped for today's episode, and we have so much to unpack here. We're going to start from the top. So what initially just drew you to the role of the clinical trial assistant, and how did you know that this was the right starting point for your career?
Well, actually, I have a quite, different background from a lot of CTAs or other people who work in clinical research, because I actually have a master's in English major lit. So it's like worlds apart from clinical research. But while I was studying in university, I was working at the TMF archive at a large pharmaceutical company in Denmark. So after I graduated, I was thinking, it was right in the middle of the Great Recession. We were still feeling the aftermath of that. So I was thinking, maybe I should try to apply somewhere where, you were guaranteed a job. And that's the pharmaceutical industry. So I wrote out a lot of applications for different roles to, different pharmaceutical companies. We have a lot of pharmaceutical companies in Denmark. And then eventually I landed a role at a CRO as a CTA. And when I started there, I really liked the variety of the job. Because, being an English major, you could just analyze a text or a book forever and ever, and no one would be right or wrong. But in clinical research and in the eTMF, for example, there is a right or wrong answer. And I somehow really like that, juxtaposition from my studies.
That makes perfect sense. I love that. So looking back, what were the most significant lessons you learned during your years as a clinical trial assistant?
So apart from, getting to know how sites and CROs and sponsors work together, I think the main thing that I learned was stakeholder management. As a CTA, you get to be in contact with so many different people. I think maybe, more than even anyone on the team, because you have your CRAs, you have the sites, you have, maybe sometimes you have the other departments within the company, so like regulatory. So you get a really large platform of people that you get in contact with. And then when you get to know a lot of people, you know who to contact for when you need something. Get to know how to address the different people, how to get things out of the different departments. Be really good at that, because often as a CTA, you'll be the last to touch something, like a document, put it into the eTMF. You get to know what's really important and what's not so important, because everyone is coming at you with different things, and and it's all really important. But as a CTA, you will need to have to prioritize, and you learn that a lot. And also relating to the TMF, because you're managing, often as a CTA managing the TMF, you get to know how important the different documents are. So you know the weight that they hold, which ones need to get in right away. I know we want to get them in right away as soon as possible, but which ones need to be there right away, and which ones, can just be replaced with a note to file for now.
And that's what I love about the CTA role, especially when you're collaborating with a CTA. If you want to know anything about that clinical trial, you go to your CTA, because 9 times out of 10, they know. If they don't know the answer, they know the person that you need to contact and they can get you in contact with that person.
Yeah, exactly. Because they will remember, who did you get this document from and which department has this or that responsibility. And you can ask the CTA, and as you say, they will most likely know.
And I know a lot of times like the CTA or CRAs rather, they want to know firsthand, like, who's my CTA? Yes. We're like the right wing man that like CRAs want CTAs. We're right there to help them along the way with any administrative tasks that they need. How do you stay motivated and driven when you're working as a clinical trial assistant for so many years?
Yes, and I know why you asked this question because I was actually a CTA. I think I was counting. So I was a CTA combined for 9 years. And that's a lot. Yeah. And within one company, I was a CTA for 7.5 years. And that's a really long time being a CTA, especially because I heard some of the previous podcasts. And they were like, oh, why did you stay at that role for 4 years? And I was thinking, wow, I stayed in that role for 7.5 years, or more. So I think for me, apart from the variety of the work itself, if you stay long enough, you get to work with different trials and different teams. So it's a different experience every time. So for being there for a long time, you get to experience the different phases of a trial, especially if you started a trial. Sometimes you do want to see it through as well. So that was really exciting, something that really motivated me. I also worked as a CTA in a very exciting moment. So going from paper, mostly paper TMF, going from that to digitizing the TMF. So I was smack dab in the middle of that. So I still remember going to the TMF archive, where there are walls and walls of binders and putting the paper into the binder, and then you're logging in and out of the archive, and then going to, get introduced to an eTMF repository, a digital one. That was also very exciting, how to, transfer paper into digital records, and then being able to help with aiding the processes and giving input to that process, because you have been working with the paper and now you're working with the digital ones, and maybe it's only the CTA at that point who's been working with the document that much, so they can give proper input, like practical input to the systems. So I thought that was really interesting. So I said yes to a lot of improvement projects relating to that. And also, I know it doesn't sound very sexy, but I think staying within the same role for a very long time and owning your craft, at some point you get in your 10,000 hours, and then you're an expert in that field. And I think that's also really nice, being really good at what you do. Sometimes people see the CTA role as something you just stay at for like 6 months just to get in within a company. And that's fine, I think. But sometimes it's also cool, to be really good at what you do, and getting to train people and getting them motivated and happy to be a CTA, because you're not just a CTA. I think actually it's a very good position in its own right.
I think it's a very undervalued role because it's often viewed as entry level, but you're getting exposed to almost every aspect of the clinical trial. And like you said, you're working with a diverse amount of people. You were in it for 9 years, like you said. How long do you think it would take for someone to master the CTA role and really get exposed to all the elements of clinical research?
Oh, that's quite difficult, I think, because it all really depends on, the company you work at, how much empowerment you get from your managers or, like senior people, and also how interested you are in actually, learning and the stuff, because learning the stuff, you will have to do the work. And it's not like bad mouthing people, but some people think they're too good to do the job and they just took the job just to get in. And I think that's, not the best attitude to have, because you do learn a lot by being a CTA. I think I always say it's a low stakes way of learning the industry and learning what you want to do within the industry, because you get to do a lot of things. I think 2 years is the companies I've been at. I think it's a very nice way to, getting introduced to the things and getting, if you stay on the same trial, you get to see, different phases of the trial. And also, getting to learning the system. Some people are very fast at learning the systems, but it gives you time to know the system, work within the system, and also, see how you can improve the systems and the processes.
What advice would you give to someone who doesn't start the trial? Say you're a CTA and you don't start the trial like at pre-study or study startup. You're coming in the middle of the study. The study's been going on for a couple of years. Like, how do you get acclimated and up to speed?
That's really hard and also very exciting. It depends on which kind of trials you adopt. I call it adopt because you get it handed like here you go, right? So there can be a lot of backlog for some of the studies, and that can actually get people really demotivated because sometimes there's a backlog because they haven't had filled the role for several months before you start. So that can be, very demotivating. So first of all, don't be demotivated. Use it as an opportunity to get to learn the study because, while you're cleaning up and doing the work, you get some of the history of the trials. So, that's one thing to get acclimated. So don't be scared of backlog. Use it for your advantage. Ask people who's been on the trial for a very long time. Ask them about the background of the trial. Ask them if there's a storyboard you can look at to see, which decisions or which, issues there's been in the trial. So be really proactive in learning the history of the trial. Sometimes people say, oh, read the protocol. And I don't know if it's just me, but I think protocols are really, really boring. And I don't get anything out of reading the protocol. It doesn't tell me that much about the job I need to do. It doesn't tell me who to contact. It just tells, the sites, the PIs how to do the study. It doesn't say anything about the study itself because the study lives so much outside of the protocol as well. So talk to the people, learn the history, just ask.
That's such good advice. Like, network with the people who've been on the trial the longest. That way they can give you that insight in the backlog of like, catch me up to speed. Where are we at? What's going on here? Why is this not making sense? Should we have this document? Like, why has this been missing like for over 90 days?
Yeah, exactly. And ask, okay, why has there been, like 7 amendments to this protocol? Don't read the protocol. Ask, the changes, look at the log of, protocol amendments, see what has been changed between the different amendments. So it's just being really proactive and talk to the people.
At what point did you realize you were ready to transition from a clinical trial assistant to an eTMF manager?
After I started at the big pharmaceutical company where I was at for a very long time, a couple of months into the CTA role, my manager asked me if I wanted to be a CTM. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we actually started the things that we could do to actually, help me transition into the CTM role. I don't have a degree in pharmaceuticals of any kind. So you could take like a certification to be able to work within the pharmaceutical company. So I did that. And then I was also, getting exposed to a lot of different people. But somehow, even though I was doing all of those things, nothing was really happening. I was glad to do the work. I was glad to do all the extra work and get the certification. But one day I was just thinking, nothing is really happening for this. So maybe this company and me and the CTM role is just not, going to work out. And that was fine. So I just needed to look for something else. And at that time, when I figured that out, the eTMF manager role was starting to emerge. So that was in 2021, I think it was. I started looking for different jobs and I saw there was a lot of job postings for eTMF managers. So I applied for a couple of those. And full disclosure, I also applied for a lot of different things because I didn't think necessarily that I wanted to be an eTMF manager. I just wanted to see, what can I actually do after being a CTA for that many years. So I applied for different roles also within regulatory, not just clinical operations. I also applied for, senior CTA positions. So it wasn't necessarily because I was done being a CTA. I just wanted to, make a change. So when I, started interviewing for the different things, I was feeling that the eTMF manager role was, one of the things that I would really like to do. So standing between. So I had a couple, not to brag, but I had a couple of, different offers. And then I thought that the eTMF manager position just sounded much better.
So tell us, what does an eTMF manager do?
They can do different things within a company. My role as an eTMF manager at that point when I started was to oversee the eTMF management processes. So we were doing the eTMF repository that we were using at my company. We had just, implemented that. So we needed to work on some processes and how to use that and training the users and also, do a lot of improvements within the system. A lot of people were asking about how to file the documents within the eTMF, which was really nice because in our company, if you generate the document, you upload it. And that's your responsibility. It's not a CTA's responsibility. We don't have CTAs at my company at all. It's not the eTMF manager's responsibility. It's your own responsibility. So there was a lot of training and also a lot of training of the CROs as well. And then writing work instructions and writing and rewriting SOPs. Yeah. And also a lot of testing of the system. So when we had improvements in our system, we would test them out. So like we get a script where you have to test out, different things within the system. Does this work? Yeah.
So were you managing people?
No.
No.
Well, not on the official level. You're managing, your stakeholders. Mm-hmm. So yeah, because being an eTMF manager, one of your tasks was also to oversee the different trials, eTMF. So you would maybe run your reports or do a manual check, and then you will have to ask people politely to, upload their documents that are not there. That in itself can be really difficult when you have people who are still new to the system and who are not used to uploading documents in a repository. So you had to, use a lot of skills and, you have to manage people, follow up with them, coerce them, motivate them, actually uploading their work. So now you're not directly managing people, but you are managing your stakeholders and the systems and the eTMF.
What's a good way to motivate them?
And that's it, right? Because this is a question that comes up anytime there's a conference. There's a networking meeting with eTMF managers and CTAs. How do you actually motivate people? My tactic has always been, to be really nice and, help them if they're really reluctant. Try finding out why they are so reluctant in uploading their things. Is it just, lack of knowledge? Is it lack of time? Is it, sometimes it's just because they don't have access to the system. Really try to find out what is it that is keeping you from uploading your documents, because oftentimes people really do want to help. They don't want to be difficult. They just don't know why it isn't working for them. And maybe they don't know why it isn't working for them. And it will be my job to find out what is the matter.
So what was the biggest shift in your mindset that you had to make when you transitioned to the eTMF manager role?
So the biggest thing is that I guess you had to be the grown-up. Sometimes people can infantilize people who are CTAs, not because that the CTM is your boss or, anyone is your boss, apart from your own boss. But as you say, it's sometimes a role that's really undervalued. Mm-hmm. And people, sometimes don't treat you very well. And then that can actually, give you low self-esteem. So going from CTA to an eTMF manager where you actually, you're the one that actually, decides things. You write the processes and people have to follow those processes. I think that was really difficult for me to, that it was okay for me to demand something of people. It's like the process that I wrote or the process that the eTMF management group wrote. It's the one you have to follow and you can enforce that upon people. And that was really difficult for me because, it takes some getting used to, I think, especially after being a CTA. And also you're expected to be the expert now. So like when you're the CTA, you do a lot of different things and you know things. You know a little about a lot of things, but now you have to know everything about one thing, and that's the eTMF. So people expect you to know everything. So, and you do know more than them. Otherwise, they'd be the eTMF manager, right? So mm-hmm. I had to believe that. So needed to build up some confidence in that I actually knew more about this topic than the other people or your stakeholders. So I had to learn that and, speak up when people are doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Or like I said before, if people aren't, uploading or not managing their documents, being able to speak up. That was really difficult for me. And, I had to learn that it was okay for me to say something because they're actually the ones that are not following the rules or the processes. So, and something that was especially weird for me was that when I started in Ascendus Pharma, there was a lot of people that I used to work with at different companies, and I was their CTA. So that was very difficult for, I think, both me and them to get used to the different dynamic that we have now. So some of them, sometimes ask me to upload their documents or sometimes, ask me to do things that they used to ask me when I was the CTA. So yeah, and it's really hard to get rid of that sort of CTA aura. Actually, and my manager at that time really helped me, establish some boundaries, because they had a hard time not seeing me as their old CTA, and I had a hard time not acting like their old CTA. It's like high school reunions, right? You go right back to how you used to be in high school, and that's what happened too. So that was actually really difficult for me, and that was. So apart from, being the expert and being like the process owner, I also had to like shed the old CTA persona.
This is such a good point. Give us a couple examples of how you set those boundaries, because it is when you shift from CTA to eTMF manager, it doesn't matter what the role is. If you get promoted and they still view you as that, that's my CTA, because you've been in that role for so long. How do you say, not necessarily, that's not my job anymore?
It's such a weird thing to say to people, like, that's not my job anymore. Because if you can help them, if you have time, it's like my personal mantra that if you can help, you should. Well, first of all, it was something that I talked with my manager a lot.
Yep.
Because I didn't know how to handle it. It was really difficult, especially for with some people. There are some people who got used to not having me as their CTA quite quickly. And there were some other people who, just kept doing it. And then, and for those people, actually, because, for the easier people, I would just, say, it's like out of the scope of my role. And sometimes I would say, I don't have the authority to do that. Yeah, because sometimes they would ask me to upload something. I was like, but I can't do that because you own the document, and, the audit trail will show that I did that. And that's for an audit, an audit or an inspection, we can't have them asking me about this document. They have to see your name in the audit trail, so I can't do that. So, so that logic, really helped. I will just say, but I can't do that because, and also sometimes I wasn't set up in the system that they wanted me to do things in. Luckily, I couldn't really do any of those old things that they wanted me to do. So, but for the more difficult people, I actually had to, talk to my manager, and my manager had to talk with their manager. So sometimes it was actually addressed. Sometimes it was really embarrassing because it was actually addressed in the department. And we have to remember that Karla is no longer a CTA, and an eTMF manager is not a CTA. So we have to respect that. So it was said in a department level, which I think was really nice because the senior people respected the fact that I wasn't a CTA anymore. They didn't want me to spend time working on different things that are not within my scope. So it was also taking time out of my eTMF work. So they had to address it as a department. And actually the manager of the different people had to tell them directly that you have to remember that that is out of scope for Karla's work, which was really nice, getting, support, because it is difficult to set boundaries. And like Nicole, you mentioned you're an introvert, and I know it doesn't seem that way, but I am too. And I'm really, not the best at conflict. So it was really nice to have the support from upper management.
I love that example. I don't have the authority to do that, or you're going to want your name on the audit trail, not mine. Yeah. And here's why. Just a simple explanation, connecting the dots to get the light bulb on of this is a good thing. You're going to want to do this, and here's why.
Exactly. Yeah. It works for most people. It's I see that, because you do want to show that it's actually your work and not my work.
I loved that example of, I don't have the authority to do that anymore. I don't have that responsibility. That's perfect. And then just the perfect chain of command. You went to your manager, and then the manager had to speak to the manager.
Sometimes it can sound a bit insulting to tell people, no, I don't want to do that. That's not my job. and also really terrifying, because some of the people that I work with are really senior. Sometimes you just automatically want to do stuff for them because they're your senior, and
Yes. And we're people pleasers.
Oh yeah. Number one people pleaser. Yeah. And it's true. Yeah.
What specific skills from your time as a clinical trial assistant have been invaluable in your role as an eTMF manager?
Having been in contact with so many departments as a CTA, and subsequently also having contact with their documents and having, so much to do with the documents, helped me meet people at their level and creating specific processes and, functionalities within the eTMF system, specifically for their documents and for their departments. So used to seeing their documents and knowing, what their documents did and when it went into the system, so we can create, very specific processes and, specific functionalities within the system to aid their work and also motivate, them using the eTMF, because it's different from department to department. And also, which challenges do the different departments, meet? Because just not to throw people under the bus, but as a CTA, I knew, like CTAs, clinical trials plus, they were very good at, getting their documents into place, because a lot of their documents need to be there in order for the drug to be released. While some departments, a lot of their documents are being generated all the time and maybe not needed until the end of the study. And somehow, just because their documents are something that is being generated over time and not necessarily final until the end of the study, they don't think it needs to be in the eTMF right away. So, right. But I know that it needs to be there, because if we're inspected or being audited, I know that they will be looking at this document. So being a CTA, you know all those things, all the different aspects of the different documents from the different departments. So I think being so involved in the different departments make you a better eTMF manager, because you can create very specific processes for the specific departments, and they feel seen, so they like that. And then they also like that their documents. I mean, they sort of get flattered, because remember this document, and also you're missing this document. How about that? And they're like, wow, this person knows our needs. They know our documents, so they're not just asking us to put something in because we have to. They know why it needs to be in the system, and also just create processes that make it easier for them. And you only know that if you're a CTA, because so if you're coming
done that.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you come from a different role within a different department, not just clinops, but maybe a role where you don't have contact with as many people, then you wouldn't know their documents, you wouldn't know the processes, you wouldn't know when their documents are ready for filing, or if it's something that can be uploaded into the eTMF. Because there are some documents that they're managed in a different system, and you know that as a CTA, because you're used to when you're a CTA and there's an audit or an inspection, you look through your eTMF, and then you see, there's something missing here, so you would know that as a CTA, and then you will ask the department, it's because we have it in a different system. And then you know that from your CTA time. And then when you're an eTMF manager, okay, that thing is missing because that is housed in a different system. And then you can just easily write that in your eTMF plan or in your TMF index without having to bother people, or, without having to just guess. And also because then you can ask them, or you can tell them, I know this document is not ready until this or that, but I've made a placeholder for it. So when you're ready, please upload it here. And, you can just provide a much higher level of service, because you know all these things, like the small things that matter.
You have that foundation, so you know already.
Yeah, exactly.
What drove you to continue growing and eventually step into the clinical trial manager role?
As I told before, the plan was always to become a CTM, and then somehow I scrapped that, thinking that, there's a lot of other things you can do coming as a CTA. And somehow people don't really know that, but I had scrapped that for some time. But as an eTMF manager in Ascendis Pharma, you were allocated to a project that had different studies in it, right? The project I was allocated to were being managed by really good CTMs, like really skilled CTMs, and they had really great collaboration within that group. So I thought, wow, that's really great. I really want to be a part of that group someday. I was already sort of a part of that group, because their manager was really inclusive, and, because she didn't think that the eTMF manager needed to be a separate part of that entity, because the eTMF is, for her, and I think so too, such a valuable part of a clinical trial that she included me in a lot of different meetings. And she would also, include me in the CTM meetings, because she thought that was really important for me to know a lot of things about the trials. So I worked a lot with that team, and I really liked that team, and especially liked the manager. So after being as an eTMF for a couple of years, it wasn't so much, because I wanted to change jobs, because I really like being an eTMF manager. I was just thinking, how can I be more integrated within that team? And then one day there was actually an opening for a CTM on that team. And because I was at the meetings, their CTM meetings, the manager said, oh, it would be really nice if you could get someone who had, a bit of site experience and also someone who really likes the eTMF, because we're going into a phase where we are going to file a lot of NDAs, and we're going into a phase where there will be a lot of inspections. So she really wanted a CTM who had a lot of eTMF experience, who wasn't afraid of looking at the eTMF. So I wasn't actually really looking for a job, but I was thinking, oh, that sounds really nice, and I really wanted to work with this manager. So I actually asked some of the other CTMs in that group, oh, do you think that I could be, considered for the part? Because I didn't think that I was going to be a CTM, but I think this sounds, really interesting. They were like, I mean, you can just always apply. The worst thing she can say is no, right? So I applied. Yeah, and she said she was surprised that I applied, actually, because I mean, I really did like my job, and I think I thrived in the job as well. And she was like, but I mean, if you really wanted to, I mean, I would definitely hire you, because I was already an integrated part of the group. And then, it's a good way of still retaining some of my eTMF skills and learning new things as well. So it isn't, as difficult of a shift that it would be if I hadn't known anything about the eTMF, or, I hadn't known the team to begin with.
So now that you're a CTM, like, what's your typical day kind of look like? Your atypical typical day? Yeah,
because I mean, like the cliche goes, like, no 2 days are the same. So I guess there's a lot of meetings. There was I think Tiffany, her name, in a different episode, like she says that no one knows that the CTM actually sits like 50% of their days in calls. So I have a lot of calls with CROs, the study team, and the submissions team as well. And so there's a lot of meetings. And then there are, for example, documents that need to be ready for site, because even though we work with a CRO, there are some documents that we need to provide to CRO for the sites. Yeah, so there's a lot of that too. There's still a lot of eTMF work as well, because this manager is we work with, she's very, very focused on the eTMF. So there's a lot of eTMF as well. Not just me, all the other CTMs do eTMF work as well, but I'm mostly, I have the focus on the eTMF right now. So right now I'm rewriting our eTMF plan. So before we had TMF plans for each studies. Now she wants a TMF plan that covers all the studies, so we do it the same way. So she wanted me to consolidate like all the different TMF plans and, make a super TMF plan to cover all the studies. So I'm doing that. So I'm rewriting that, and then also, working with the CRO to get their input and their processes in, to have it make sense for both of us. Some of the exciting things as well, going to like site initiation visits, going with, so I still don't have my own trial, but I, co-CTM, I think right now 4 trials, 3 trials officially, but 4 really. So go to site initiation visits, which are really nice, to meet the sites and, get, their pain points, and also have them meet, sponsors, which is really nice to have, get acquainted with people who actually do the work with the subjects. Yeah.
Always nice to put a face to the voice on the other side, or the emails. I love that connection and building the relationships with the sites, because eventually we're going to need to get some documents from them.
That's the end game always, to get, good data and the documents. Yeah. Because, So it's really nice. And also you can just call them if you've met them before, or you can email them directly. And, it shouldn't be so difficult for a CTM to contact the site personnel. And we do that often.
Yeah, I always preach, just pick up the phone. Like, it's so much easier than going back and forth with email. You waste so much time with email.
Yeah, exactly. So, and also, get the personal touch, because we get a lot of emails, but we don't get a lot of calls actually. So
I know. That's so true. Yeah. It's weird when the phone rings. You're like, is my phone ringing?
Yeah, exactly. And I never pick it up.
What advice would you give to someone who's currently in the clinical trial assistant role, who aspires to follow a similar career path?
Okay, so I know as a CTA, as we've mentioned before, you're involved in a lot of things. You have a lot of tasks, you have a lot of stakeholders, and, you do a lot of different things. And you're like we call it like, in Danish, you call it an octopus, because you have like your arms in different things that you have, and it's all over the place. So, but I think you should stop being a jack of all trades. So still do your job, but then find something that you really like and dive really hard into it. And then maybe it doesn't have necessarily so much to do with your everyday work, but it could be something that has to do with your work, but then be really extra with it. When I was a CTA at a CRO, I just got out of, university, and I was still really, into English. And, we speak Danish here in Denmark. So a lot of our documents come in from, different sponsors in English, and then they had to be translated. So I would, offer my help to the regulatory team to do some of the language review, do some of the translation, verification. And, it wasn't part of my work, but I was like, I'll do that. It's fine. I can do that. So, because then they started to know me in that department. And because, I was, doing that as my specialty, at some point when a position opened up at regulatory, I could, apply, and then they knew who I was. And, and it wasn't such a weird shift. If you really like something, if you're interested in something, so ask if you can help out. Because I know a lot of people, some people really like, meetings. And then they would just go really hard on, study meetings. And we used to have it's called international trial management meetings. We had those in the previous company I worked at. And they were like, I want to plan that. And they were really good at it. And then at some point they became meeting planners. They really like having that vendor management. And now they work in outsourcing. And then I know someone who, she really loved the systems. And she just how do they work together? And now she's a business analyst. Find something within the role that you like. Try pairing that with something you want to learn. So I think that's, yeah. So of course, do your job, do all the things, but, be known for one or two things, being good at one or two things.
Mm-hmm. Niche down.
It's not because I thought that it was only fun to do the eTMF, but I really like Viva. Yeah, now we name dropped. But I just really like that. So I volunteered when we implemented that I wanted to work on that, even though it wasn't, necessarily my job. I was like, oh, yeah, well, I can test it out, or I can, give input to this process. And that experience, not because it was my job necessarily, I could write that on my application when I wanted to become an eTMF manager. And if I hadn't said yes, or if I hadn't, volunteered, then I wouldn't be able to write that on my application. Then I would maybe have the chance of becoming an eTMF manager.
So I always end my show with the same two questions. One, what's the best career advice that you've received, and who's it by?
So the best advice I got was from a woman called Angela Lopez Rosso, and I got it from it was like a networking meeting of some sort, or a workshop talking about how CTAs can progress within their career. So she said that the best thing she ever did for her career was just to say yes to everything. So she said yes to opportunities that she may not have, seeked out herself, or maybe not necessarily something that could lead her to where she wanted to be. Because again, I've been listening to some of your podcasts, Nicole, and then I think it was again Tiffany Ashton who said that you have to be really clear on what you want to do, so you can, go that way, so you're not wasting time and you can, just progress. But I think actually sometimes it's really nice to just say yes to things that you might not necessarily think would be for you, because you never know, right? So she would just keep saying yes to things, because she was saying yes to things that led her to places that she wouldn't necessarily be. But then she was at that place where maybe opportunities were opening up that you wouldn't have known or seen if you would just stay in the place where you were secure, or where you were thinking that I need to be because this is the way I want to go. So now, she didn't know exactly what she wanted to do. She was just saying, okay, yes, let's do that. And she knew that she didn't want to be a CTA forever, but you could, like I did, maybe I had my eyes set on the CTM role for a very long time. Nothing really happened until I said yes to being an eTMF manager at a different company, where I then met some other people who then gave me the opportunity to become a CTM, right? So, and that happened after 2.5 years, where I had stayed at my previous job for 7.5 years. So sometimes, say yes to things. Try it out. I totally get it. Sometimes it's really scary to say yes to things that you don't know where it would lead to.
Karla, what is your favorite TMF document and why?
this is a crazy question, I think, because only a TMFer would have an answer to this. So I really like any RA or ethics committee initial submission letter. The ones like, dear, authority, and then we are now applying for this or that or submitting this, and then the list of all the documents that you are submitting. Because like on a spiritual level, it's such full of hope. So it's like, the version 1 of everything. And then also, as a TMF manager or a CTA at that time, when you have to check it, you get, the letter, and then you have to check if all the documents are in your TMF. So I like doing that because there's like a little, bingo game aspect to it. So I think it's a very nice TMF document, At that point, very uncomplicated.
Well, Karla, thank you so much for joining me on the TMF Daily Podcast. I loved our conversation about career progression and talking about the CTA role, eTMF manager role, and CTM.
Thank you, Nicole. So nice being on your show.